Hello everyone. Hello everyone. Welcome to Chapter 2 of Not Quite a Boy, a Draco Harry fanfiction. I do not own this story. Credit goes entirely to the original author, Zakaira. This is a fan-made audiobook for entertainment purposes only. Thank you for listening. Chapter 2 Narration. Warning. The following chapter contains a 14-year-old masturbating while thinking about another intersexed 14-year-old. By then lunch was halfway over. I found Ron and Hermione in the Great Hall where I engulfed a sandwiches as everyone around me pestered me for details about what was wrong with Malfoy and what had happened. I'd promised not to tell, so I busied myself with stuffing my face. While I did so, I decided that I had to tell part of it, at least to Ron and Hermione. The burning urge to tell someone was too strong for me to keep silent. They were my best friends and they could keep a secret. A few minutes before the end of lunch, I pulled Ron and Hermione out of the Great Hall and into an abandoned classroom. "So, what's going on with Malfoy?" Ron asked. Hermione nodded. "He asked me not to tell, so you have to promise this stays between the three of us," I said. "Harry, if you promise not to tell, maybe you should keep this to yourself. It's not really our business when another student is sick or injured." "He has a right to privacy," Hermione said, ever the voice of reason, despite Malfoy's past slurs directed at her. Ron said pretty much the opposite, in a very inarticulate way that earned him a dirty look from Hermione. "Look, I'm not going to tell you the details. I just need to talk about it with someone. I don't understand most of what happened. I was hoping you could help me, Hermione," I said. "All right, what happened?" Hermione caved. "Malfoy was bleeding because he got his period, which Pomfrey said was because he's a fairy," I started, but Ron cut me off here. "Malfoy's a fairy?" Ron asked, snorting in laughter. Hermione smacked Ron on his arm and glared at him until he controlled himself. Then she motioned for me to continue. "Malfoy didn't like that word for it. He had a ray long name for some medical disorder that he said he had. They mentioned male fertility and puberty. But we are all going through puberty and no one mentioned blokes having periods when we become fertile to me," I explained. "So Ron, since you clearly know something Harry and I don't, what does being a fairy mean in the wizarding world?" Hermione asked, annoyed. "It means someone who has girl bits and boy bits. It happens in the Muggle world too, but I don't know their term for it, but I do know that typically Muggles with it can't have children, but magic repairs the deformity so that fairies typically can have kids. But sometimes the sex is so mixed up that boys are fertile as girls are the other way around. I think that's what's happened here," Ron answered. "All right, I'll look it up. I'm sure I can find a book on the subject," Hermione started. She paused and thought, before turning a stern glare on Ron and me. "The two of you better not breathe a word of this to anyone. You got it? If I hear rumors around the school about Malfoy being a fairy, I'm going to hex you with Ginny's bad boogies." The last was threatening and scary. Evidently she felt strongly about this. "Okay," Ron acquiesced. "I wouldn't," I insisted. "Just the three of us can know." Hermione nodded. "But what do we tell the others? They were harassing me during lunch." "You'll have to ask Malfoy what story he wants to tell everyone," Hermione answered. "Now come on, we're late to class." We ran to class. I got distracted with schoolwork, but then on the way to dinner, I ran into Malfoy surrounded by a bunch of students. "Malfoy, can we talk?" I asked. Malfoy looked over to me, stress on his face. Then he sighed and his expression shifted to one of relief. "Yes," he answered, and pulled me into Myrtle's loo on the second floor. "This is a girl's bathroom, you do know?" I asked. "Yes, but no one ever comes in here." "Now what do you want?" Malfoy asked. "What's the story? What are we gonna tell people?" I asked. "The story is that Pomfrey and I kicked you out of the hospital wing as soon as you dropped me off, so you didn't see or hear anything. Got it?" He asked. "But surely we need a better story than that. People are still going to want to know why you were bleeding," I protested. "Was bleeding? Not anymore. As far as they know, Pomfrey healed me. If you must know, the story I told the Slytherins is that Crabbe and I were dueling last night and he messed up the hex and we didn't know what went wrong. That caused internal bleeding, which eventually came out my ass. But because I was bleeding from my bum due to one of my roommates, Pomfrey asked if I'd been sexually attacked and I said yes, to see what sort of special treatment I could get out of it. He smirked. You know, a very me thing to do, and I played it up a bit, so now I have my own room and don't have to share with boys who might possibly, as far as Pomfrey knows, rape me. Okay, I said, drawling out the second syllable in disbelief. Was this really his plan? You don't like my plan? He asked cockily. I think it's brilliant. It's just that you're letting the whole school think Crab raped you. Disbelief again. No, I'm not letting anyone think Crab raped me. I'm letting them think that I lied to Pomfrey about Crab raping me, to get my own room. Don't forget the duel gone wrong bit, yeah, Potter? I nodded, finally fully comprehending the plan. It was madness, but it also seemed like the type of thing he'd do, so I decided to go along with it. Besides, it sounded like he'd already told people this. I have to go. I don't want to miss dinner and have everyone notice that I've missed it with you, Malfoy said, before turning and walking off towards the Great Hall. I hung back and then took the long way around to the Great Hall, so that we wouldn't be seen together. After dinner, Ron, Hermione, and I went to the library. Ron and I set about copying Hermione's notes from Transfigurations and passed her potions essay back and forth between us, getting ideas for our own, while Hermione busied herself looking for books. She came back to the table with a large stack, but soon narrowed it down to one large tome, which she checked out and began to read. Hermione's new book came with us to Gryffindor Tower that evening, but now she was ready to tell us what she'd learned, so we went up to our empty dorm room and locked the door for some privacy. She sat on my bed, book open in her lap, and started. The Muggle term is hermaphrodite, although intersexed is the new more politically correct term. It's rarer in the Muggle world and almost always covered up, so it appears even rarer than it is. Usually a Muggle with this condition is assigned a gender at birth which may or may not be the right one. When puberty hits, sometimes the gender is switched to be more appropriate, but still, the Muggles make them pick one gender or the other, when really neither fits just right. This is where wizards are doing better. They've created a third gender, fairy, to encompass those with elements of both. I'm not sure why Malfoy would have a problem with the term. It seems like a good thing not to try to force people who are both into one category or the other. But why would someone be both a boy and a girl, Hermione? I asked, not understanding. It's genetic. There are all these genes that are involved in sex determination. If it goes wrong, then the body gets confused about which sex to become. Different genes are responsible for different aspects of sex and each causes a different disorder when mutated. And then within each disorder, the severity can range from almost normal to almost the opposite sex and everything in between. There are all these possibilities, so I can't possibly figure out which one Malfoy has. But basically, they are sorted into three categories: Touré hermaphroditism, where there are cells present that are genetically male and cells that are genetically female. I wasn't aware that could happen, but the book says there are a couple of ways, like if a set of twins fuse into one baby, she lectured. I jumped in there. Is that what Malfoy has? No, I don't think so. I can't be sure, but it just doesn't sound right to me, she answered. Then what is it? Ron asked. Hold on, I'm getting to that, Hermione snapped. We waited, listening again. So the second type is when a person has the genes to be female, but something goes wrong and they appear partially male. This is apparently really rare in the magical world. A witch's innate magic is thought to correct this condition in utero, so although it happens in muggles and squibs, it's almost unheard of among witches. So not that one, then? I asked. No, I don't think that one is it, either. I think it's the last one, she answered. Which is? Ron asked, impatient. A person with male genes, but some or all female genitalia. See, a baby by default is female, so it's harder to go from female to male and easier for magic to fix. All these genes are needed to turn a baby into a boy, so there are lots of ways that can go wrong, and some aspect of the, can be left to go down the default path to female, while other parts become normal boy parts. There are a lot of types and I haven't read them all, but what is interesting is the way magic corrects these disorders. If a male doesn't have enough genes to become a fertile wizard, magic takes over and tries to make them fertile. If they are closest to male, the magic will make them male. If they are too far away from being male, the magic has no choice but to make them fertile as a woman. This means there are wizards out there that can get pregnant and have babies without taking special potions. I think this is what is going on with Malfoy, why he's having a period. Wow, I exclaimed, fascinated. Yuck, Ron exclaimed, disgusted. I glared at Ron and Hermione smacked his shoulder. If I was Malfoy, I would have punched Ron. But as it was, my mind was too busy racing with trying to make sense of the new information. Malfoy could get pregnant. Malfoy has female parts. That triangle of pubes I'd seen might not have been without a visible cock by chance. What if there was no cock at all? What if he was all female down there and I'd just seen my first glimpse of naked witch? I was hard again just thinking about it. Being 14 was like that. So is that what Malfoy is then? I asked, just to make sure. I think so. It's the most common of the 3 types in the Muggle world and it's even more common in the Wizarding world. It's probably all the inbreeding, because half of the Wizarding section of the book is on how these single Muggle disorders are typically clustered in wizards. There's no reason why someone should have 2 different unrelated sex disorders, but it happens all the time in wizards, Hermione said. Malfoy mentioned 2 disorders. I put in, what were they? We could look them up, Hermione suggested. I don't remember, they were really long names, I replied. But, maybe if I could see the book, I might see the names and remember. Sure, Hermione said, passing over the book. I took it and began flipping through the list of conditions. I recognized persistent Malarian duct syndrome first. Here, this one, I shouted excitedly, pointing my finger at the title of the section. Hermione and Ron leaned in, pressing against either side of my shoulders to read with me. Basically, it was a condition in which a wizard lacks the hormone needed to suppress the formation of the uterus and stuff. It wasn't so serious on its own, because muggles with it were still often fertile, with the lower bits being normal boy parts. The wizard section on the syndrome said that it was exponentially more common in wizards than muggles, especially so among purebloods. There was also some speculation that magic had linked this disorder to other disorders, to provide a uterus for wizards who could not produce sperm. The second condition took me longer to find. I went past it a few times, but I remembered a number in the name of it and there was only one disorder in the book that started with a number, 5-alpha reductase deficiency. On my third go, I flipped back to it and said, I'm not sure, but this is the only one that fits. Again, we all leaned in to read. This deficiency provided a vagina. It made the outer genitalia more feminine. There was usually a small penis or a large clit and no scrotum, explaining what I'd seen, or rather, hadn't seen. Okay, so we just need to see how they interact with magic, Hermione said, pulling the book towards her. She flipped to the back of the book and found a section on the 2 conditions manifesting together in wizards. Again we read. It started off by saying that it was especially common among blood purists, listing half of the families in the Sacred 28, including the Malfoy and Black families, as having known members with it. The book stated that these individuals were genetically male and almost always identified as male with male brain activity. But the genitals could look entirely female and they could have children the same as a witch. This was because magic recognized that there were no functioning male bits and therefore turned the testes into ovaries instead. Genetically male, XY, ovaries. Finally, the section went over a list of male and female traits that could be found in these individuals. Maybe I was a sick pervert, but reading that was so hot. I excused myself from my friends, found an empty loo, and had myself a good wank. I didn't wank often. Most of the time I woke up with dirty sheets and didn't need to take care of anything. But this was too much stimulation for one day. Not only had I seen pubes, but I'd just read a book about genitals. It was a tasteful book done in a clinical-sounding manner, but it might as well have been porn to my 14-year-old brain. Especially the micropenis pictures. Why were micropenises so hot? I was more into clits than dicks, but a micropenis was infinitely more appealing to me than a clit. Although macroclit was a close second, and way hotter than a normal clit. I began imagining Malfoy naked and what I would find under that big bush. I pictured him with a micropenis and then a macroclit and then kept flipping back and forth between the two as I stroked myself. I soon came, thinking about Malfoy. Not just his genitals, but his pale blonde hair, his beautiful gray eyes, his smirk, and his intoxicating laugh.